So this video will focus on the subliminal and covert methods used to program millennials. Now we've all heard of this subliminal messaging, subliminal programming, some of us more familiar than others. And if you are new to this, I'll make it painfully obvious that this is happening. Now many of us have seen the Disney, Nickelodeon compilations of subliminal programming. And a lot of people have pointed this out and have made tons of videos showing endless amounts of programming happening with these TV shows, these movies, but no one has really focused on why. At least very few people have. So why would they be doing this? What is the purpose of this? Well, there are multiple reasons why. The main one is to prep the subconscious minds of children so that they will be more easily and readily accepting of the overt programming that we've discussed in previous videos, right? So the nymphomaniac style, player style programming, the beta programming, all those types of preset identities that they throw at us. So they get us at a young age with these subliminal messages to prep the subconscious mind in order to accept these. Another reason they do this is just part of their mocking ritual in a sense, right? We've all seen these predictive programming, these subliminal messages. Another aspect of that is just simply mocking us. It's a metaphysical way of them pointing and laughing at us, saying, ha ha, look what we can do. There's nothing you can do to stop us, and most of you won't even notice. And they believe that this mocking enhances their so-called spells over us, their ability to control, tightens the grip in a way. It's kind of like a psychological torture, but very subtly. And I remember growing up watching some of these cartoons, and I think the worst programming, now that I've really studied this and looked into it, many people point to Disney. I think personally Nickelodeon is worse than Disney, and I can just simply point to a show called Ren and Stimpy that somehow was directed towards children, and just some of the disturbing content in those shows was just unreal. So that this was happening, but the thing is that these creators, quote unquote, they know that the parents aren't going to be sitting down watching the entire episode, so they know not to screw around so much in the beginning of the episode when they're most likely to be accompanied, right? They'll sit down, check out for a few minutes, and then they'll walk away. And then as the program develops, they will start to put in more programming, more subtle programming, more subliminals. And there's this general ethos of Nickelodeon that has this hyperactive ADHD, ADD style of just demented humor that millennials kind of became obsessed with. And there's actually been studies that have shown about SpongeBob, because SpongeBob too was kind of big in this kind of demented ADHD humor. There were studies that SpongeBob actually lowered children's IQ and attention spans. And to me it makes sense because it's this constant shifting, this constant hyperactivity of the narrative, and just kind of creates this bing, bing, bing style of brain activity that seems to be more prevalent in millennials. And I can see this now today, even more with Zoomers, but millennials really, like, we're obsessed with short form. We're obsessed with short form. We're on Twitter all the time. We're on these YouTube shorts that are now taking over. TikTok. Most millennials don't read novels, right? We have lost the ability to focus deeply on a certain subject for a long period of time. I believe this is due to the media programming, the subliminal messages, the covert style of operations that were done on our psychology via the media. Because, like I said before, millennials are a very special case in the sense that we had the most controlled cable, the most highly developed cable news programming. Right, we were the final phase of the cable generation, the television generation. Now it's internet, and although more decentralized, they have obviously now have a stranglehold over that. But we were more cable oriented, and that's why they focus on the cartoons and the Nickelodeon and the Disney also. So now there's this focus, and there's this inability to just hunker down on certain subjects because of this programming that we face as young children growing up into adulthood. And going back to Nickelodeon too, you also have the creepy, freaking weird Monarch teen style TV shows that to me seem like a sort of an initiation for these girls who would later become celebrity pop stars. It was kind of like their Monarch butterfly programming. If you're not familiar with that, it's just a style of MK Ultra brainwashing, specifically more geared towards women to create them into these. It's like a life ritual on somebody to create them from a good girl to the horror type archetype. And we see this with the Nickelodeon programs with Dan Schneider and all this questionable, not even questionable, overtly predator-like programming. So that was also a millennial, zillennial type of, because that came later, more into the early 2000s. But yeah, think about television and internet too, is that it puts your brain into an alpha state. And an alpha state is just similarly to like a meditative state of your brain. It's a slower state of your mind. It's a more subconscious state to be in. And when you're in that state, you're more susceptible to messaging. And obviously, programmers have understood this for a long time now. And obviously this goes way, way back to people like Edward Bernays, for example, who was Sigmund Freud's nephew, and he developed a lot of modern propaganda techniques. It was him who convinced women to start smoking, because before his programming, women didn't smoke. It was seen as a nasty thing for a woman to do. And he associated smoking with women's liberation and had a propaganda campaign. And then women started smoking more than men. And he also developed, the carbohydrate cereal diet, where the North American diet used to be more protein rich, and he made it into more of a carbohydrate breakfast, which obviously has led to thousands of lives, millions of lives being destroyed, the obesity. So yeah, not a very good guy. And this goes way back to him. In the medium of the modern sense, like propaganda is obviously ancient, but in the modern context, right? So we have this Nickelodeon, Disney too, right? We see just sex subliminals everywhere. People try to weasel their way out of it, say, oh, you're just seeing things. It's like, no, this is not coincidental. It wouldn't happen with the same medium over and over again if it was just some sort of blind happenstance that Disney just happened to have these over and over again. More programming, more subtle programming, more subliminals. And there's this general ethos of Nickelodeon that it has this hyperactive ADHD, ADD style of just demented humor that millennials kind of became obsessed with. And there's actually been studies that have shown about SpongeBob, because SpongeBob too was kind of big in this kind of demented ADHD humor. There were studies that SpongeBob actually lowered children's IQ and attention spans. And to me it makes sense because it's this constant shifting, this constant hyperactivity of the narrative, and just kind of creates this bing, bing, bing style of brain activity that seems to be more prevalent in millennials. And I can see this now today, even more with Zoomers, but millennials really, like, we're obsessed with short form. We're obsessed with short form. We're on Twitter all the time. We're on these YouTube shorts that are now taking over. TikTok. Most millennials don't read novels, right? We have lost the ability to focus deeply on a certain subject for a long period of time. Now, another way they programmed us was the school system. Now, if you were in the public school system like I was, you probably had more negative experiences than somebody who was in a higher echelon, an elite tier. But these school systems, especially in North America, the model it's based off of is really the old Prussian model that came about to reform into a more modern industrial society. And what these school systems were designed to do was to create factory workers. That is why it is regimented. That is why you get there at 9, and because they're nice, they make you leave at 3, but they also put on, 1 to 2 hours of homework on top. So in reality, you really are just doing a 9 to 5 job style program at a very young age in order to regiment you and program you. And they have the desks and the authority figure at the top telling you what to think, what to do, what history is, even though they're lying about what actually history is. They tell you to sit still, to focus on menial tasks that have no actual benefit to you. Now, I'm not saying education is bad. Education used to be a classical, liberal style where you were taught philosophy, real mathematics, sacred geometry, Greek, Latin, music. And if you weren't apt for that, then they would put you into trades, which is awesome too, because learning how to work with your hands is a massively valuable skill. But instead, they churn us into this universal program to make us into little factory bots. And obviously, if you're in Europe, you probably had a better system than when we do in North America. You had more of a more leeway. You could go into a specific art school or a tech school or what have you. But in North America, it's very generalized, it's very universalized, and it's becoming even more so now. I mean, just look at Common Core today. Some of the math in Common Core is literally dark magic, in my estimation. It's actually evil. Okay? So we are in these programs in school, these grades, right? And we graduate the grades until we wear a black robe and we put on a little square hat, the mortar board. And the mortar board represents that our minds have been properly molded. We are now properly programmed into the way they want us to be. The rough ashlar, the masses, have been programmed properly in order for them to fit their needs. Because if you were a programmee, you're not going through the same system we are. You're going to a private system where you're getting a classical education instead of the garbage that we're given. And I just remember in school, like, they would make us do cursive for like an hour straight. Like, my hand was, not even my hand, I remember kids in my class, their hands were straining at the point of just pain. And it was like this weird, like they always did these weird, pointless activities just to psychologically torment us. And if you misbehave, well then if you misbehave too, a lot of the time the teachers will publicly just try and humiliate you. They'll make you sit up in front of class, they'll make you sit beside the teacher like you're some like weirdo freak. You know, we also see that boys are not excelling in that setup of sitting for 6 hours a day and writing down meaningless little tidbits of information. Boys are not succeeding in that at all. And it's no wonder we have a lot of energy at that age, and to just be sitting for 6 hours a day is just ridiculously stupid. But this is all part of our programming. And once we finish our day, 9 to 3, possibly 3 to 5 for homework. So then when we're finally done our day, after our little meaningless menial tasks and learning fake history and fake math, we get home, we do 2 more hours of homework, maybe 1, unless you're finished and you're lucky. And then you are either, you might get a little bit outside time, and then you're plopped in front of the TV, as a millennial child especially. And then the programming happens, and then we watch Nickelodeon, and then we watched Disney Channel and all that glorious programming telling us little morals. They love to tell us these little morals in these stories. And in my estimation, the morals that they taught us in these little shows were these slave mentality, everyman, universalist, weakling-inducing lessons that they want us to embody, and they don't embody, right? They want the New Age universalism for the masses, and they want the elitist hierarchical mindset within their own circle. So that's how they really get us, if you want to go even deeper. But that was how a lot of us were raised. And what I noticed in my 20s is that when I met somebody who was homeschooled, they were particularly unique in their identity. They seemed less universal. They seemed less pliable, like they weren't just a carbon copy. And a lot of them were running their own businesses and entrepreneurial type people who could think creatively, who were actually very creative people, often working on creative projects, side hustles, right? They weren't programmed into this, the only way to make income, the only way to be successful is to be in a regimented style of work, where you work 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, every day until you retire, maybe, hopefully, but retirement is going away now. And they just seemed like happier people, and I talked to them about their life, and they didn't really have that much schooling in comparison to what we had, and yet their life outcome was better. Now, some of them did go to university, obviously, and then they got the programming there, but it wasn't just this cradle to grave programming that the public school has given us. And this is what I see humans in general, is that we are not meant to be regimented. That is actually a very unnatural thing. Human beings are meant to create things, are meant to do projects, and then move on to the next project, which is probably going to be a different project than the previous project. But they had to train us to be factory workers. And millennials maybe are the last factory workers in the West. So now obviously they're developing new sorts of programming, digital programming, because now they need people to create the software, to create the coding, to do the online digital style economy that we're now in. But obviously the subliminal messaging, the covert programming did not stop when we were kids. It continued to this very day. And the most common subliminal program, subliminal message, is a sexual one. And why is it sexual? Because you then associate the product with sex, and your reptilian, deep little monkey brain, the lower brain, associates that with sex, and then tells yourself subconsciously, that's good, buy that. That's going to be beneficial for your genes to survive, because it's sex associated. And that is how, and that's the reason why, and that's how they do it. Right? Burgers? Really? You can't just sell us a cheeseburger. You have to subliminally mess with our minds to sell us a cheeseburger. Are you kidding me? But, and that again goes back to it being a ritual to them, to the programmers. Part of the ritual is to mock us. Part of the ritual is to program us. They get satisfaction out of it. They think their power increases, and that's connected with the predictive programming too, which I'll get into on a different video, more into the predictive programming side of things, because I think there's a lot more going on there than what others have said. But this subliminal messaging, these Nickelodeon freaks, and I remember too, in the Canadian context, there was this show, is this, not the show, but this channel called YTV. And there would be these little break segments, right? These little, like, B footage. And these B footages were really weird. Like, I'm into weird things, but this was weird. This was like messed up. It was always these weird, goopy monster things, or demented, like, just churning, dementoid creatures. And I remember I'd always get this weird, like, this gross feeling, even as a kid, watching this stuff. And even thinking back to it now, it's like, what the hell were they doing to our brains? Now I know why, but there was a reason for it. It was to make us demented too. And what else? I remember before I go to, there was always Goosebumps before I go to bed, and there was Are You Afraid of the Dark? And these were like haunted shows, like basically horrors, mini horror movies on the kids channel. And every night before I go to bed, I'd be freaking terrified and have nightmares because I'd be watching these shows at like 9, 10 o'clock at night. So why were they trying to scare us every time we went to bed too? What was up with that? Well, that was this negative vibration they were trying to instill with us, right? There is this aspect to millennial people that is really obsessed with the shadow, the dark, the what I call the Nightmare Before Christmas kids. Which, what did that lead to? One of the most infamous millennial preset identities. The emo kid. Obviously the emo kid was a prep. We were prep. So many kids were prepped. I wasn't emo. I knew emos though, but I was not an emo. I was friends with some of them. I remember one time I went to a emo concert and I was the only person wearing red. Everyone else was wearing black. It was very odd. Anyway, these emos, they were prepped. Their minds were prepped to accept being an emo with all the dark conditioning, the horror conditioning. And that takes a toll over time. You become desensitized. Now people watch gore and they don't even get fazed by it anymore. Like I can see a live leak of China. There's all these live leak China footage and I see it. And I don't even flinch. It's like I've been so desensitized by all the programming that I can see horrific accidents happening in China and just literally there's nothing. And other people I've talked to feel this way too. It's just like, yeah, there's just nothing. And that's kind of the horror emo programming they received, right? And what else came with that? This gets pretty dark, okay? Just gonna put that out there. This gets pretty dark, but this emo conditioning programming led to a lot of kids doing self-harm, and it was very, very common for emos and millennials to cut. Very common. And you probably knew somebody who did that. And this wasn't a thing that was common with previous generation, maybe Gen X, but not boomers and older than that. This is a new thing, and it really became prevalent with millennials cutting, and this kind of suicidal idolation that was also really projected at us with the grunge scene, which definitely is a Gen X phenomenon. But since we were young, growing up as kids, what were we listening to when we were children? What was in the background? It was Nirvana. It was Alice in Chains. And what happened to these guys, right? Tragic ends. heroin. The use of heroin was associated with that scene as well. So the programming goes deep, everyone. It goes very deep. And what I'm trying to say here is that we need to become aware of what we have been programmed to do, to act, to behave like. And once we become conscious of that, I'm not saying like overnight you're going to be able to break the conditioning, but you're going to become more conscious of it. You're going to be able to recognize when you're behaving in a preset behavior, and then you could stop yourself. Ever since I started doing this, little series, I've been interviewing former friends, I guess they still are my friends, but friends that I were closer with when I was a kid, and just asking them about their trajectory as millennials. And it's not good, because alcoholism is a big problem. And actually, the biggest problem I see is weed and tobacco use mixed together. And this is a big thing with our generation too, is that this phenomena of mixing the weed and tobacco, making it almost a separate drug, a highly addictive separate drug. It's almost this unique high that you get from it, and that's a big problem. Still, these guys are in their late 20s and they're still struggling with this stuff, and these are like successful guys, but they're still hooked. They're still hooked on these drugs, which was pre-programmed behavior that was shot into our minds through the media, right? But the good news is that more people are waking up, more people are becoming aware, this is becoming a more common topic, and more people want to take their kids away from the mainstream programming institutions and the mainstream media, because they've recognized that it is not healthy for their kids. Their kids will become corrupted like we were. Obviously our power within is overcoming that programming, but it's still there, and we still struggle with it. And I have to say though, myself, like, becoming completely sober for like almost 5 years now, it's really done a lot for me. And it was not like that before. It was bad before. It was really bad, but I understood at a point that these behaviors, they weren't me. I was following a script that was written for me by other people who do not have a good intention for me, and who want me to be docile and dependent and easily controllable. And the most easily controllable things in this life are the things that they subliminally program us with, and that's sex, and that's drugs, and alcohol, which is a drug. So that's why it's all about sex. That's why it's all about drugs and drinking. These are the things that keep us the most docile, the weakest. And am I saying these things are inherently evil? No, but they project the corrupted nature of that, the inverted nature of that, the shadow side of what those things are. They can be enhancing. Obviously, you want to have a partner to build strong communities with, right? And if we're all just in this nympho programming, we're all just in Roman orgy land, then we're obviously not as strong, because we're not creating the next generation. We're not uplifting the next generation. No one's gonna know whose kid is whose, and it's gonna be like bonobo society. There's also the vibrational aspect of subliminal programming. And I don't mean that in the new age sense either. That sense where, oh, you don't want to be in a low vibration, man. But in the sense that Nikola Tesla said that you need to think in the world in terms of vibration, right? And if we're constantly being bombarded with negative programming, these rap songs, these rock songs, these Nickelodeon weird freak shows and Disney stuff, that energy hitting us on a vibrational level makes us weak. It doesn't make us strong. Because I don't want to come out as new age, but there's truth to this vibrational energies that we can be hit with, right? If you go into like a sacred building or a site, like I was in Uppsala in Sweden, which is a sacred burial ground. There's like this uplifting energy you can get, right? And it makes you feel strong. It's not the new age love is light energy that just makes you kind of just the squishy thing. But there is an energy out there that I think that makes people strong. And there's an energy out there that makes people weak. And what they want to do is make us weak. So they put out this negative energy, and that messes with our own energies, and we feel depressed and we feel saturated, especially in like a city. I remember just feeling dragged down all the time, but it was the constant bombardment of all these messaging, the media programming. Out here, there is no billboards trying to subliminally influence me, right? And I think that's why nature too has that healing aspect, because you're free from all those negative influences, right? There's no subliminals out there that are making people stronger. They're not sending out vibrations to make people tough and capable. They want us to be squishy and weak, and love is love, and love is light, and all is one. And to put our heads in the sand so we don't look around to see anything negative, because anything negative is going to make myself negative. So better not do that. Better not talk about any atrocities going on, because that's going to affect my own vibration. No. That's the thing too, is that there is truth in a lot of these mystery schools and the Hermeticism, but they keep for themselves the wheat, and they give us the chaff, and they give us the chaff in the form of the New Age. So they have the real esoteric knowledge about vibrational energy and about this stuff, but then they feed us the weak version, oh, I don't want a negative vibration, man, that type of vibrational talk, right? Because the thing about these controllers, what have you, the gremlins, the programmers, the goblins, they believe in all this stuff, undoubtedly, right? They have the societies, and I'm going to make a video on societies of my understanding of it. And they have all the knowledge, and they believe in it. And they see themselves as these wizards. I see them as dark wizards, because That's what they are, clearly. They use the occult in a negative way to make people weak, to increase their own power. Right? They're Saruman, living in the Tower of Orthanc, turning us into Urukai to create this industrial society for them in order to benefit their own power. And that is what I think of that. They want us to be a bonobo society, so we're just constantly in this Roman orgiastic world where there's no more fealty, there's no more bloodline. It's all mixed together in this whose kid is whose world. And that makes us more controllable. That's part of the programming. So recognize that in yourself. Recognize the SpongeBob SquarePants freak, just ADHD, dementoid programming that they went after us, and acknowledge that, and just remember, like, it's not your fault. It's not your parents' fault either, because the boomers were programmed. The programming obviously wasn't at its level that we were at, but it was still there. And I think that what we need to do is just point it out more. Point it out more, understand it in ourselves, and we'll work through it as a community of truth seekers. And a lot of people have been commenting like really interesting takes on the stuff that I've been talking about, and I really appreciate that. And if you want to give your own take on this video too, go right ahead. I'd love to hear it. If you like the video, consider subscribing. If you'd like to give it a like, and a share is always awesome as well. And I'll see you next time.